In this Blender beginner tutorial, I will show you how to create low poly animals in Blender. So in this tutorial, we're going to be creating this cute low poly duck. We're also going to be creating this low poly shark. And we're also going to be creating this low poly dog. And I'll have all the timestamps in the video description if you just want to jump to a specific part of the video and learn how to create one of these animals, or you can watch the entire tutorial and learn how to create all of these 3 animals. And this tutorial is geared towards beginners, so I'll be going very slowly and telling you all the different buttons I'm pressing. So if you are a beginner to Blender, or if you want to improve your modeling skills, then this is a great tutorial to follow. Now, if you're wanting to create more animals than just these animals, then definitely watch this tutorial, because after watching this tutorial, you'll definitely have the skills to create really any low poly animal. You'll learn how I create these different kind of animals using the reference image. So for example, we'll be adding the dog reference image on side view, and then I'll show you how to add a basic object, and we'll add a mirror modifier so we can mirror one side of the dog over to the other side of the dog, and I'll be extruding the dog up, and then I'll show you how to like extrude down the legs and make the different details for the dog. So after following this tutorial series and creating these 3 different animals, you'll definitely have the skills to create really any low poly animal in Blender. And if you'd like to purchase the finished tutorial project files to get the final renders, the finished 3D models, and the reference images, then you can purchase the tutorial project files with the links in the video description, and you can get that on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. And that's also a great way to help support this channel. And if you are a beginner to Blender, then you might also be interested in checking out my Blender beginner tutorial series, where I show you all the basics of Blender while creating this snowman character. And so that tutorial is completely free on my YouTube channel, and it's also linked in the description. Now, as I mentioned, I am going to be using some reference images to help us with the modeling, so the reference images are completely free, and I'll have the links in the video description where you can download the 3 different reference images, or if you purchase the tutorial project files, then you'll get the reference images. And you don't have to use the reference images that I'm using. If you just want to grab your own reference, you can. So I'll be using this duck reference for the duck, and then also for the dog, I'm going to be using this dog reference, and then for the shark, I'm going to be using this reference image here. So here we are in a new scene in Blender, and you can see my screencast keys are going to be right down here in the corner, so you can see what button I'm pressing during the video. So I'm going to start by pressing the A key to select all the objects, and we're going to hit X, and we're going to click on delete to delete everything. Let's now save the project, so we'll click on File, and we'll click on Save. And I'm just going to save this as animals.blend, and I'll click on Save Blender File. So as you're working on the project, you can press Ctrl S to save the project. Alright, so let's model the duck now. So what I'm going to do is click on this little X here, and that's going to go to side view, or you can also press the 3 on the numpad to go to side view. And from my file browser, I'm just going to drag and drop the reference image into Blender and drop it here. So we're dropping it in on side view. So you can download this reference image with the link in the description. It's also available in the tutorial project files, or you can use your own reference. Now, because we're looking at this on side view, the front view is actually over here. And so I want to just mirror this. So what we're going to do is hit S to scale, and then we're going to hit Y to scale it on the Y axis. And then to just flip it perfectly, we're going to type -1 and then enter. So now the duck is pointing forward, and we'll just stick it here kind of in the center. So let's now go here to the add menu, or you can hit Shift A, that is the search. So Shift A will go to the add menu, and let's go here to mesh, and we're going to add a circle. Now, right after you add the circle, if you click right here, right behind me on the add circle settings, we can change the vertices. So let's just type in 12 and hit enter, and then we can close the add circle settings. So now if I go up here to the top, you can see it's much more low poly, and that's what we're going for. So let's again hit the X here, click on the X here on the gizmo, or you can press 3 on the numpad. And I want to hit the tab key to go into edit mode, or you can click right up here on object mode and change it to edit mode. And we're going to hit S to scale, and we're going to hit R to rotate, and we're going to rotate this up, and then hit G to grab and move it over, and then hit S to scale again and scale it up and rotate it over a little bit. So we're just going to stick this in the center of the body of the duck. So we'll now hit the E key, and that is going to extrude out the mesh, and we'll click here. Then we'll hit S to scale it down, and we'll hit R to rotate, and then G to grab, and just kind of put it right there. Then we'll hit E to extrude again, and we'll hit R to rotate, G to grab, and then S to scale, R to rotate, G to grab, and we'll just kind of stick it right there. Then we'll hit E to extrude again, click there, and we'll hit S to scale, and then R to rotate, and then G to grab, and we'll put this right about there. Then we'll hit E to extrude again, and we'll rotate it and move it down right there. And then we'll hit E to extrude again, and we'll hit R to rotate, click there, and then S to scale, and then G to grab. All right, we'll extrude this out again, and then we will rotate it, and then we'll move it down here, rotate it again, scale it down a little bit, and then we'll extrude out again, and scale it down and rotate it, and just stick it right there. And then you can see right here, the duck's head should kind of come up a bit more. So I'm going to add a loop cut by pressing Control R. So Control R, and then we will left click, and then we will right click so the loop stays in the center. Now, if I hold down the Z button, I can see the pie menu, and I'm going to move my mouse to wireframe and let go. You can also click right up here to go from solid to wireframe so we can see the background image. And I'm going to hit G to grab and move it up just slightly and place it there. And then I will hit the A key to deselect everything, and I'm going to hit the B key for the box select, and I'm going to click and drag and box select just these vertices. And I'll hit G to grab and move them up. And I'll just stick them right up about there. So I can hold down the Z button and then move my mouse to solid view and let go. So you can see now it's a little bit higher up. We also might want to select this loop here or select that vertex and go to the other side and shift select that vertex. So hold down the shift key and select that vertex as well. And that way we have both of them selected, and we can edge slide them. So to edge slide, you can tap the Z key twice, and that's going to edge slide them. So we can just slide that down there so it's a little bit more even. Now what I'm going to do is hit the 3 on the numpad to go to side view, or hit the X button. And we're going to hold down the shift key and click with our middle mouse wheel just to move down here. And we're going to model the back of the duck. So we want to select this entire back loop. So let's hold down the Alt key, and then we can just select that loop there. And I can hit E to extrude, and then S to scale, and R to rotate, and then E to extrude, S to scale. Let's navigate our view more down here. We'll bring it down, and then E to extrude, S to scale again. Now you can see right here, there's like a bunch of little feathers and things, but since we're modeling a low poly stylized duck, we don't want to model all those little details. So what I'm going to do is just make a cute little tail, which is kind of curving up. So let's hit E to extrude, click there, S to scale, scale it down, click there. We can rotate it with R, and then we can extrude it up again, scale it down, and just make a cute little tail. So if I just middle click to pan around, you can see we have just a little tail there, but you can see the tail gets really thin. So what I want to do is hold down the Z button, and we're going to go to wireframe, and then we can hit B for the box select, and we're going to click and drag just to box select the back there, and we'll hold down the Z button and go back to solid view. And now what we want to do is scale this, and we're going to scale it on the X axis. So hit S, and then we're going to hit X, and we're just going to make that a little bit more thick, just like that. Then what we could also do is hold down the Alt key and select that loop and scale it up on the X axis a little bit more, like that. Now it looks like I need to recalculate the normals, because if I middle click and move around here, you can see the shading looks a bit weird. So if I go back into edit mode by hitting tab, and then let's hit the A key to select everything, and we're going to hit Shift N. So Shift N is the shortcut key to recalculating the normals. The other way to do this is by clicking here on Mesh, and then you can go down here to Normals, and then you can click on the flip or recalculate. So you can see it's Shift N, so you can flip the normals, but I recommend using the shortcut key of Shift N because it is a lot faster. So now what I want to do is delete half of the duck, and then I want to add a mirror modifier. And that way when we model other things over on this side, like when we model the wings, it'll be mirrored over to the other side. So I'm going to press the 7 on the numpad to go to top view, or you can hit the Z button, just click right there on the Z on the gizmo, and I will hold down the Z button, and we'll move over to wireframe and let go, and then double tap A to deselect everything, and we'll press B for the box select, and I'm going to click and drag here, just like that, and then just let go right there. So we have this half selected, but we don't want to select the vertices there in the middle. So those vertices right there, we don't want to select those, just these vertices right here on this side. And we're going to hit the X key or the delete key, and then we're just going to delete the vertices. So now if I hold down the Z button and go to solid view and let go, you can see we just have half the duck. So let's go here to the modifiers. We're going to click on add modifier, and we will type in mirror, and let's click on mirror modifier. Now because the origin point was in the very center there of the object, it's going to mirror where the origin is, and so now we have the whole duck again. And let's click on the clipping button, and the clipping button is going to merge the vertices which are right here in the center of the mirror, so they can't be pulled out of the mirror. So let's use our scroll wheel to zoom in, and now I want to fill fill in these faces right here. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select this vertex and that vertex and this one and this one and this one. And we're going to extrude them in. So hit E to extrude, and we're going to extrude them into the mirror like that so they merge with the mirror. And then we'll hit S to scale and we'll scale it down, and I'll hit G to grab and move it over a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is hold down the Shift key and select these 3 vertices and hit F to fill a face. We'll select these 3 vertices and hit F. So now if we select these vertices here, I can hit G to grab and pull it out a little bit. And then if I select this vertex, I'll hit G and move it out a little bit so that it kind of rounds over a little bit. Also, what we could do in edit mode is hold down the Alt key and select that loop right there. And then we could edge slide by double tapping G. We could slide it up a little bit. So we'll hit Tab to go back to object mode, or we can click on edit mode and go to object mode up here. So now we have the very front of the bird's head, and we are going to be modeling the beak right on that object. So let's go back into edit mode, and I want to scale everything in a little bit because it's a little bit round here. So I will scale everything, and we're going to scale everything on the x-axis and scale it down just a little bit so it's slightly more flat. All right, so now let's hit 3 to go to side view, or you can press the X button here to go to side view. And we're going to hold down the Z button and go to wireframe and let go of the Z button. And now what I want to do is model kind of like a very basic wing here, but the wing's going to be tucked into the body. So what I want to do is actually move some of these vertices around so that they kind of fit the wing better. So I'm going to deselect everything. So double tap A to deselect everything. We'll use the box select by hitting B, and we're going to drag here and select these 2 vertices, and we'll rotate it with R and then G to move it down like that. Then we'll box select these vertices here, and we'll just double tap G. So double tap G to edge slide and bring that up. And then if we box select that, and then we'll hit B again for the box select this, we'll double tap G to edge slide it up. Let's hold down the Z button and go back to solid view. So you can kind of see we've shaped the wing now. Let's also select this one here, and we'll double tap G and we'll edge slide this back there. So now we have that wing shape. So we're going to click here to go to the face select. So now we can just select the faces instead of the vertices. So we're going to hold down the Shift key, and we're going to select all of these 6 here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's navigate over here to side view, and we're going to extrude this out. Then let's hit 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and we're going to rotate it and move it over a little bit. We could also scale it a bit on the x-axis to kind of flatten it, just like that. Now what we could also do is click on this little line button here to go to the edge select, and we could select this edge, and we could hit G to grab and drag it down a little bit. Select this edge and G to grab, bring it down a little bit. Select this edge and bring it up a little bit, and maybe bring this down a little bit just to round the shape of it a little bit. That's looking pretty good. Now also right down here on the very back here, we have this little bit here, and I want to fill the face there. So we'll click here to go to the vertex select, and then we're going to hold down the Alt key and select that loop there. And we're going to press the F key, and the F key is going to fill all the vertices with a face. Let's press 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and I'm going to hold down the Z button and then go to wireframe view and let go. And if we zoom in here to where the neck is, you can see there's that little white bit. And when we do the materials, I'm going to want to add a little white ring. So let's hold down the Alt key and select that loop right there. And then what I'm going to do is press Control B. And Control B is going to add a bevel, so you can see now there are 2 loops, and I'll just scale them up and then just click right there. So I'll hold down the Z button, go back to solid view and let go. Now I also think that right here, this is a little bit sharp, and this is low poly. We're making it stylized, but I do just want to add another loop in here. So we'll hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, or click on the X button, and we're going to hold down the Z button and go to wireframe. We're going to deselect everything by double tapping A, and we're going to hold down the Alt key and select that loop there. And then we will double tap G to edge slide it, and we're going to edge slide it up a bit so there's a bit more space. Then we're going to press Control R to add a loop cut, and we will left click and then right click so the loop stays in the center there. And then I'll hit G to grab, and we'll just move it down slightly so that kind of rounds over. But then we'll double tap A to deselect everything. We're going to box select just these vertices, so hit B and then drag a box, and we'll hit G to grab and drag it down, and then R to rotate. We could also select these vertices here and double tap G just to edge slide it. So if I hold down the Z button and move my mouse back to solid view, you can see that is a bit smooth now. Let's hit Control S to save the project. So we're going to now add a new object for the beak. So if the 3D cursor is somewhere else, not in the center, we want to hit Shift C so the 3D cursor is in the center, and then we'll hit Shift A for the add menu, or you can go to the add menu here, and we want to go to mesh and add a cube. Now the cube is very blocky, but what I'm going to do is click on add modifier, and we're going to type in subdivision surface. Now the shortcut key for adding the subdivision surface is by pressing the Control and then the 1 on the top of your keyboard. So Control 1, or you can search for it here. And so now you can see we've added a subdivision surface, so it is nice and round. And of course you can turn up the levels here if you want to be more and more round, but since we're going for a low poly style, the viewport levels and render levels, we're going to keep those both at 1. So let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and I'll hit G to grab and move it up. And then we will hit the tab key to go into edit mode, and we're going to scale everything down a bit. And then we'll press the period key. If you hit the period key on the numpad, that'll zoom into the object. Or you can just pan and then zoom in. So let's hold down the Z button and move our mouse into wireframe. And we're going to scale everything down and rotate it and move it right over there. And then we're going to deselect everything, so double tap A. We're going to just click and drag to box select those vertices and hit G and bring them down. Then we're going to hit B for the box select and box select those vertices. And we're going to hit E to extrude, and then we will scale it down a bit. Like that. Now, because this is a stylized duck, I find that he looks a little bit more cute if the beak is a little bit smaller. I think that modeling the beak this long is just a little bit too long. So because I'm going for a low poly style, I am going to just make the beak a little bit shorter than the reference. So we'll deselect everything and then hit B for the box select and box select the back part. And we're going to extrude it all the way over here. And then we'll scale it up. So hit S. And then R to rotate and G to grab and just fit it there to the beak. So let's hold down the Z button and we'll go to solid view and we'll middle click and drag to zoom over here. Now you can see it starts to round and cave in here, so I want to delete this face. So because we have this face selected, we're going to hit the X button or the delete button, and we're going to delete the faces. So now you can see it's a bit more sharp there, because if I go back to object mode and move it out here so you can see what it's doing, it's really sharp there. So I'll just hit escape to bring it back, and then we'll go back into edit mode. Now I want to make it a bit longer, so what I'm going to do is select everything by using the A key to select everything, and we're going to hit S, and then we're going to hit X to scale it up on the X-axis to make it a bit longer, and we'll click there. Then we will hold down the Alt key and select that loop there, and we'll scale this loop on the X-axis as well to make it longer, just like that. So you can see we're getting a really cute beak shape. Now I want to make a distinction between the top of the beak and the bottom of the beak, so what I want to do is apply the subdivision surface. So if we click on the drop down here, we can click on the apply button, or if you hover your mouse over the modifier and click on the modifier so it has that little blue outline, you can press Control A to apply it. So now if we hit the tab key to go into edit mode, you can see there all of that is actual geometry. So I'm going to add a loop cut by pressing Control R, and we will left click and then drag up and left click there. And then we will hit S to scale everything down a little bit. And then we're going to scale everything on the X-axis a little bit. So hit S to scale along the X-axis and click there. So now if I go back to object mode, you can see there's a little crease there. So you can kind of tell the top beak from the bottom beak. Let's hit Control S to save the project again. Let's select the main object again, and we will hit Tab to go into edit mode. And I'm going to hit Shift A for the add menu, and I'm going to add an icosphere. Now, we want to pull it out of the mirror, but we need to turn off the clipping, because with clipping turned on, it's going to merge it with the mirror. So we'll hit escape. So I'm going to turn off the clipping button there on the mirror, and then I'll hit G to grab and S to scale and G to grab and just put it right there. And then we can click on this button to turn the clipping back on. So let's hit the 3 on the number pad or click on the X there to go to side view. And we're going to hold down the Z button and go to wireframe, or click on the wireframe button. And we're going to hit G to grab and move it over here. And we're going to zoom in with the scroll wheel, and then we'll hit S to scale it way down, just like that. So we'll go back to the solid view, and I'll hit G, and I'll bring it in along the X-axis, and we're just going to stick it right in there into the head. So now we have a little low poly eye. So let's hit Control S to save. So now what I want to do is create another object for the feet. So if the 3D cursor isn't in the center, you can press Shift C to center it into the center of the scene, and we will hit Shift A for the add menu, and we're going to add a cube. Let's bring the cube down, so G and then Z, and we're going to bring it down, and then we will hit the tab key to go to edit mode, and we'll scale the cube way down, and then we're going to hit G and we're going to hit X to bring it over on the X-axis. So let's now press the period on the numpad to zoom into our selection, and I want to add a mirror modifier to mirror it over to the other side, and you can see because we moved the object over in edit mode, the origin point is still in the center there. So we'll click on add modifier, and we can search for the mirror modifier. Now, if I hit the 3 on the numpad to go to side view, you can see there's like 2 legs. The legs aren't exactly like parallel, and they look like he was kind of standing on like a log or something, so it's kind of tilted over. So not the best reference for this, but these are pretty easy to model, so we're not going to follow the reference super closely. So let's go to wireframe, and we're going to just click and drag to box select the top, and we'll bring it up. So hit G and then Z and bring it up there, and then we'll scale it up a little bit. Then we're going to click and drag to box select the bottom, and we'll hit G to grab, and then S to scale, and just make it a bit thinner and maybe rotate it as it goes down. So now we're going to extrude it with E, and then we're going to rotate it and move it over, and then we'll scale it down. So again, R to rotate, G to grab, and S to scale. So we'll just place that there. Then we will extrude it again, click there, and we'll rotate it, and we'll move it like that, maybe bring it back a bit. And then we're going to extrude it over, but this time I'm going to extrude it on the y-axis. So hit Y, and it will extrude on the y-axis, and we'll bring it out about that far. Let's hit B for the box select, and we're going to box select that vertex right there. So we have these vertices selected, and we want the feet to be a bit more thin. So we'll hit G and then Z and bring it down on the Z-axis. Actually, I need to escape that because we have these vertices selected. So we'll double tap A to deselect everything, and then click and drag to box select the top of the feet, and we'll bring it down on the Z-axis. Maybe click and drag to box select these vertices and bring it back a bit. And if we click here, we can bring this back a bit. So let's hold down the Z button, we'll go to solid view, and I'll click and drag with my middle mouse wheel. And we're starting to get the feet, but I want to select the entire feet and bring them down a little bit on the Z axis. So G and then Z to bring it down. Now also, if we go to wireframe view by holding down the Z button, moving our mouse to wireframe and letting go, we can press A to deselect everything, so double tap A, and then we'll click and drag to box select the top thick part of the feet, and we're going to scale that in a little bit. All right, let's go back to solid view. So now what I want to do is select these 4 vertices here. So hold down shift and select those 4 vertices, and I want to scale them, and we're going to scale them on the x-axis to make the cute little webbed feet. So like that. Also, if I hold down the alt key and select that loop right there, and shift alt select that loop there, so hold down the shift and alt key at the same time, and that's going to select those loops, and it will select both of them. We could scale these up, and we're going to scale them on the x-axis, so they're a bit thicker. So now what I want to do is kind of make the pattern there, the shape of the feet, so kind of that webbed part. So we're going to hit Control R to add a loop cut, but then I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel, and I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel until we have 3 cuts. You can see we have 3 cuts. So we'll now left click and then right click so the loops stay in the center. So I'm now going to click right here to go to the edge select, and I'm going to select the center front edge, and I'm going to move it, so G to grab, and we'll bring it on the y-axis. Click there, and then you can also select this vertex or select that edge, and then shift select this edge, and we'll hit G to grab. Now if you hit G to grab, you can click down with your middle mouse wheel and let go, and then that will constrain it to either the X or the Y or the Z. So just G to grab and then click with your middle mouse wheel and move it in that direction. So that's a quick way to constrain it to an axis, and we'll click right there. Now we'll select this edge and shift select this edge, and we can scale them, and we can scale them on the x-axis a little bit. So we have those cute little webbed feet. So we'll select everything with the A key, and we're going to rotate everything. We're going to hit Z to rotate it on the Z-axis, and then hit G to grab, click down with the middle mouse wheel to bring it over on the x-axis, and just stick that right there. All right, so we're almost done, but I also want to model a little cube here, which is going to be a little kind of a back toe there. So let's go to the add menu, and we're going to add a cube in edit mode. So shift A for the add menu, and we're going to add a cube, and we're going to scale the cube way down, and we'll hit G to grab and move it over here. And let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and we'll scale it down and move it over here. And we're going to rotate it a little bit, and then we'll hold down the Z button and go to wireframe and let go, and we're going to zoom in close to it, and we're going to click here to go to the vertex select, and we're going to deselect everything, and then we'll hit B for the box select and box select the 2 ends, and we'll scale it down and bring it over, and then we'll hit E to extrude and S to scale, like that, and maybe G to grab and R to rotate. We're just going to make kind of a little back piece. So now let's click and drag to box select the entire piece, and we'll go back to solid view by holding down the Z button, going to solid view, and let's navigate over here, and I'll hit G to grab, and we'll bring it over on the X-axis. Let's also scale it a little bit on the X-axis, so S to scale, scale it on the X, and then if we go to the face select, we can select this face, and I can scale it, and we can hit X to scale it on the X-axis to make it a bit thicker. Now, it would have been slightly better if I had waited to rotate the duck feet out slightly until after we had modeled this piece, but we can just kind of tilt it and fix it. Now, to select this entire piece without selecting the other piece, we can deselect everything, and then with our mouse hovered over just this piece, we're going to hit the L button, and that is going to select all of the linked islands. So these are all touching each other and they're connected. So we're going to rotate this, we're going to hit Z to rotate it on the Z axis, and then we'll hit G to grab and we'll just bring it right in there. So we have kind of like that little back toe piece. So we will hit tab to go back to object mode and kind of zoom out here. We can actually hit the A key to select everything and then press the period on the numpad to kind of zoom into everything. So now let's do some materials. So I'm going to hold down the Z button and move my mouse down to the material preview so we can see what it looks like in the material preview. And let's click here on the material properties. So first we'll select the beak. We're going to click on new to add a new material, and I can just rename this material to duck beak and hit enter. And then for the base color, I'll make this a nice yellowish color. Now what you can also do is hit the 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and if you select the reference image, we'll hit G and we'll just move it over here, maybe up here, so we can kind of see the colors. So we're going to select the beak, and let's just make this a nice bright kind of yellowish color. So now what we're going to do is select the body. Actually, we'll select the feet first, and we'll click on new, and I'll call this duck feet. And then if we click on the base color here, we're going to make this kind of like an orangey color, a nice bright orange. Now we're going to select the duck, we're going to click on new, and I can type in duck head and hit enter. So we'll zoom into the duck head, and then let's make the base color a nice dark green. So we'll make it darker and very saturated green. Now if you look at the reference image, you can kind of see it almost looks a bit metallic just because of how like the fur and feathers are. So we could just turn up the metallic a little bit to kind of give it that shiny look, and then just turn this down a little bit. So I'm going to have this nice rich dark green. So that's looking pretty cool. Now what I also want to do is hit tab to go to edit mode, and I want to make that little ring there. So we'll hold down the Alt key and we'll select that loop of faces, and we'll click on the plus there to make a new material. So we're making another material, but within the same object. So this object can have multiple materials. So click on the plus, and we're going to click on new, and I can double click to rename this, and I can call this duck neck. And then we will click on the assign button, and for the base color, I'll just make it a little bit darker. So now what I want to do is hold down the Alt key and select that loop there. So Alt, select that loop, and then we want to hold down the Shift and Alt key, and that way we can Alt select multiple loops. So Shift, Alt, select that loop, and that loop, and that loop, and then that loop there. Let's navigate right over here, and then hold down Shift, Alt, and select that loop, and that loop, and that loop, and that loop, and then Shift select the very end. So we don't want to Alt select the very last face, we just want to hold down the Shift. And then if we hold down the Shift key, we can select those two. And if we hold down the Shift key, we can select those two. All right, so we'll click on the plus here to make a new material in the material slots. We'll click on new, and we can rename this to duck body. Let's hit Control S to save the project. And then because we have the body selected, we'll click on the assign button. So now for the base color, we're just going to make this kind of a nice brownish color. So bring it towards the orange, and then to make it brown, we're just going to make it a bit darker. Let's hit tab to go back to object mode, and we'll see how this is looking. And I think I want to make the base color a little bit darker and make it a little bit more saturated. And you can, of course, play around with the roughness of the materials if you want to, but I think just kind of keeping it maybe slightly shiny like this, so maybe a roughness of 0.5 looks pretty good. Let's maybe make it slightly darker. Let's hit the tab key to go back into edit mode, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and select that loop there. So that's the loop around the wings. And then we will just hold down the Shift key, and we're going to select all of these faces there. Now if we hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, you can kind of see the duck has that brown there, then it kind of has like a yellowish belly, and then the wings are a little bit different. They're kind of similar materials, but what I'm going to do is just make a separate wing material. So we will click on the plus here to make a new material. We will click on new, and I can rename this to to duck wings, and then we will click on the assign button, and then we'll hit tab to go back to object mode so we can see the colors. And for the base color, I'm just going to make it slightly brown, so it's going to slightly start to go towards the orange, and then we're going to make it a bit darker. And actually I think that's a bit too brown, so we'll make it more of like a grayish color and make it a little bit darker. Alright, so now what I want to do is create the belly. So we'll hit tab to go to edit mode. Now I want the belly to kind of round over here. So what I can do is use the knife tool to kind of cut out some of the mesh. So we'll hit the K button for the knife tool, and I can click here, and then we will click right there, and then we will click right there and hit the enter button. So now you can see we have a cut there. And if we click here to go to the vertex select, we're going to select this vertex, and I'm going to double tap the G key and just bring it down a bit. So now we're going to click on the face select, and we're going to hold down the shift key and select all of these faces, and then navigate to the back, hold down the shift key, and we're going to select all of these faces here, just like that. So all those faces. So we'll click on the plus to add a new material. Let's click on new, and we can rename this. If we double click on it, we'll rename it to duck belly, and then we'll click on the assign button. We'll hit tab to go back to object mode, and then for the base color, we're just going to make it kind of like a light gray. And maybe for the duck wings, if we click on the duck wings, this could be slightly darker. And then the duck belly could also be slightly darker as well, so that's looking pretty good. Also, if I click on the feet again, maybe I'll make the feet just a little bit more towards the red and maybe slightly darker. Alright, so if we select the main object again, we will hit the tab key to go into edit mode, and I'll make sure everything is deselected, and we will hit the L key with our mouse hovered over the eyes. So hit L, and that's going to select all of the linked vertices, so they're basically their own object because they're connected to each other. So we'll click on the plus here, we'll click on new, we'll click on assign, so that new material is assigned to the eyes, and then we'll double click on this, and we're going to call it duck eyes. And then we'll just take the base color, I'll make it fully black, and then we'll take the roughness value and we'll drag it down. So if we go back to object mode, if I zoom in here, you can see the roughness is making it a bit more shiny, so it looks a bit more reflective like an eye. So it looks a little bit more wet and shiny. So now what I want to do is apply the modifiers and join it all together into one object. So if we click here on the modifiers, we will click on the drop down and then click on apply. And then what I also want to do is select the feet. We'll click on the drop down arrow here on the mirror and apply that. So now if we just click and drag to box select all the objects, I want to hold down the shift key and select the body last. So since the body is selected last, it has the yellow outline and all the other objects will be joined into it because it was selected last. So we're now going to press Ctrl J, and Ctrl J is going to join them together into one object. So there we go, we now have a really cute duck, a low poly duck. So let's hit Ctrl S to save the project. And we can press the H key. The H key is going to hide that object. So let's hit 3 on the number pad to go to side view, and we want to select the duck reference, and we also want to press the H key just to hide it. Or if you're not going to be using it anymore in the scene, you can just delete it. So let's now add in the shark reference. So from our file browser, we're just going to drag and drop in the reference image. So here is the reference. Again, you can download it with the link in the video description, or it's also going to be in the project files. So I'm going to scale this up a little bit because the shark is a bit big, and we'll just stick it right about there in roughly the center. So let's now hit Shift A, or you can also click here on add, and we want to go here to mesh, and I'm going to add a circle. And right behind me, if you click on this button to turn on the add cylinder settings here, let's type in 12 on the vertices and then close the add circle settings. So you can see it's going to be a bit more low poly. So we will hit 3 again on the number pad to go to side view, or click on the X there to go to side view. So now let's rotate this. We'll rotate it by 90 degrees, just like that. And then because we rotated it, let's hit Control A, and we are going to apply the rotation. So this is now the default rotation of the object. So let's hit tab to go to edit mode, and I'm going to click here to go to the vertex select, and we're going to scale it down a bit and bring it up a little bit and just stick it right there. Now if I hit 1 on the numpad to go to front view, we want to scale this in, so we'll scale it and then click down with your middle mouse wheel and let go to constrain it to the x-axis, and we're just going to make it a bit more thin, just like that. So it's more of an oval shape. So let's now hit 3 on the numpad to go to front view, and we're going to hit E to extrude. Let's click there. Then we're going to hit Z, so hold down the Z button and move your mouse to wireframe and let go so we can see through the reference, or we can see through the model and we'll see the reference behind it. So we'll hit S to scale and then G to grab, S to scale, G to grab, stick it right there, bring it a little bit more forward, and then we will extrude it out again. Let's extrude this out all the way to kind of where the mouth is. We'll scale it down a bit and rotate it, and then we will extrude it again, and we'll scale it down a little bit. So just bring it right there to where the kind of back or the very bottom of the mouth ends, right there on the front. We'll extrude it out again, and we'll scale it down and bring it right there, and then extrude it again and scale it down and make it much smaller. Now we're going to use the knife tool. So we're going to hit the K button, and that's going to turn on the knife tool. And then we want to cut through the entire mesh all the way through, not just the front. So we're going to hit the C button, which turns on the cut through. You can see right down there, it says cut through. So we're going to click here, and then we're going to click right up here. And then we're going to click right about there, then click right down here to connect right there. And then we'll go right over there, click there, and then click right down there. You might need to zoom in, click there, and then hit enter. So if I hold down the Z button, move my mouse back to solid view and let go, you can see we've cut through the entire thing all the way over. So let's now go to the face select. We're going to hold down the shift key and then click on all of the faces. So just select each one of the faces, click with your middle mouse wheel to navigate over here, and then shift and click on all the other faces. And we're going to hit X and we're going to delete the faces. Now we could fill this in right now, but later on in the video, I'm going to be deleting half of it and adding a mirror modifier to model the different parts that need to be mirrored. So that's why I'm not going to fill this in, and I'm not going to fill this in yet. We'll fill it in later once we add the mirror modifier. So I'll hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view. Let's hold down the shift key and then middle click and drag over here. And let's click here to go to wireframe, or hold down the Z button and move your mouse into wireframe. So let's make sure we deselect everything. And then we're going to click and drag to box select the vertices here. And we're going to extrude them. And then we're going to scale them down to kind of the other side of the fin. So we have a vertex there, or we have a loop there, and then another loop there. And let's now extrude it again. So E, and we're going to extrude again, kind of scale it down like that. Let's hit Control S to save the project. And then we will extrude again and scale it down. And we're going to put it at the starting of this little fin. And then we'll extrude it again to the end of the fin and scale it down a bit more. And also to rotate it over slightly like that. And then we can extrude again. And we're going to scale it down a little bit more. And then let's add a loop cut here. So we will hit Control R to add a loop cut. And we will left click and right click so the loop stays in the center, and then we'll scale it down a little bit and scale it along the Z axis. So S to scale and then hit Z to bring it up and down on the Z axis. We can also hit G to grab and move it right there in the very center. All right, so let's now click and drag just to box select these vertices, and we'll extrude them. So hit E to extrude. Bring that out there, and then hit S, and we're going to scale it down like that. Now let's make the top fin. So I'm going to hold down the Z button and go to solid view and then let go. And let's navigate right up here, and I can go to the face select, and we're going to select this face and then shift select this face. Now actually, before I do this, what I want to do is go to the vertex select, and we're going to select this vertex and shift select this vertex, and we'll double tap the G key to edge slide, and we'll edge slide in the back. And then if we select this vertex and this vertex, we'll double tap the G key and edge slide them in. So it's a little bit more of a round shape. We could also select this vertex, double tap G, and then edge slide it out. Select this vertex, double tap G, and edge slide it out. So if we go to the face select, we will shift select these two faces, and we're going to hit 3 on the number pad to go to side view, and we're going to hit E to extrude. And then we're going to hit S to scale. Let's also go into the wireframe view, and we'll scale it down a bit more and just fit it into place there. And then we'll hit E to extrude and S to scale, bring it in like that. And then E to extrude and S to scale and make it really small and stick it there. And then we'll click here to go to the vertex select. We're going to deselect everything. And sorry that my screencast keys got turned off, but they're right there in the corner. So let's deselect everything by double tapping A, and we're going to hit B. And we're going to click and drag just to box select those vertices, and we'll hit G, and we'll just bring it down a bit like that. So I'll hold down the Z button and go back to solid view. So there we go, we just have that big top fin. Let's now add the back fins here. So I'm going to navigate to the back, and I'm going to go to the face select, and I'm going to hold down the shift key and select both of these faces. Let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and I'm going to hit E to extrude, and then S to scale, and G to grab, and R to rotate, and just stick it into place there. Let's go into the wireframe view so we can see this a bit better, and we'll hit E to extrude again, S to scale, R to rotate, and G to grab, like that. and then E to extrude, and we're going to bring this down here because you can see there's kind of like this bit here where it comes out a little bit. So then let's go to the face select or the vertex select. We're just going to box select these vertices by clicking and dragging, and then we'll hit G to grab and bring them up. So now if I hit B, we're going to click and drag and box select those vertices, and we're going to extrude the entire thing, scale it down, kind of rotate it just like that. And then we're going to extrude out again, scale it down, and just stick it there and rotate it. All right, just like that. So let's hold down the Z button and go back to solid view. Now you can see it gets very, very thin there because we keep on scaling and scaling it down. So what we're going to do is go to the face select. So click on the face. Let's hold down the shift key and we're going to select these faces, and then hold down the shift key and select the other faces. All right, and let's kind of look here on back view, and we're going to scale them, and then let's scale them along the x-axis and just make them a little bit thicker because they are like quite thin. So S to scale and then x-axis. Let's now go to the vertex select, and I'm going to deselect everything, and I'll use the box select, so hit B, and I'll click and drag and box select these vertices, hit B, click and drag and box select these vertices, and I can scale them along the x-axis, and then just box select these, and we'll scale them along the x-axis to make it a bit thicker. Now you can see if I zoom in really close, right here it kind of rotates back. So I'm going to select this vertex, shift select those vertices. Let's navigate up here and shift select that vertex, shift select that vertex. And then to pan again, you hold down the shift key and then middle click and drag to pan, and we'll shift select that vertex and that vertex. So all along there. So let's hit the 3 on the number pad to go to side view, and we'll hit G to grab and just pull it out slightly. So it's going to round over a little bit. So let's do the bottom. So we will hit the tab key to go into edit mode, and I'm going to navigate here to the bottom, and let's go to the face select. And we're going to hold down the shift key and select both of these faces. And let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view. And I will hold down the Z button, and I'm going to move my mouse over to wireframe and let go. So let's see the entire fin, and we're going to hit the E key to extrude it. And then we'll scale it down. And we're going to do pretty much the same thing. So R to rotate, S to scale, and G to grab. So we'll stick it there, and then hit E to extrude, S to scale, and just stick it into place. E to extrude, R to rotate, G, and then S, and we're just going to continue to do that all the way down. So scale that down. Let's navigate over here. So hold down the shift key and middle click with your middle mouse wheel to pan, and then let's scroll in. We'll scale it down, rotate it, stick it there, and then extrude it one more time, scale it down, and bring it there. All right, now if I hold down the Z button and go to solid view and look out here, you can see it is pretty thin. So let's kind of do the same thing. So we're going to go to the face select. We're going to select these two faces here, and let's scale the faces out on the x-axis. Then we can hold down the shift key and select those two faces and scale them up on the x-axis a bit. What we also might want to do is just hold down the shift key and select these two faces and scale them on the x-axis. And then if we go to the edge select, we'll zoom in really close and hold down the shift key and select these two edges, and we'll scale them along the x-axis. And then with the edge select still turned on, we're going to select this edge, shift select this edge. Let's navigate up here, shift select this edge and this edge. Not that edge, but that edge, and then that one there. So kind of that back spot. Let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and we'll hit G to grab. And then when you're dragging it, you can hold down the shift key, and that's going to make your movements more sensitive. So I'll just bring that out and then click right there. So we'll just navigate over there. We'll hit tab to go back to object mode. So there is the tail finished for the shark. Let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and we want to zoom in here. We'll hit tab to go to edit mode, and you can see we already have like some faces which are the correct size. So we're going to select this face here. So we'll click to go to the face select, then we'll select this face here and then shift select the other face. And we will go back to side view, and we will hold down the Z button and go to wireframe, and we're going to extrude everything up. So E to extrude and S to scale, and then E to extrude and S to scale, maybe rotate this over and move it over a bit. And then we could also add a loop cut here. So hit Control R. So Control R will add a loop cut. We will left click, we'll drag it down and then left click there. Let's navigate up here, and we could scale everything down a little bit. So if I hold down the Z button and go to solid view, just scale that in a little bit. And then also if we go to the edge select, we could select these edges. So select this edge, hold down the shift key and select these edges, we can bring them back a bit. And maybe if we select these two edges, we'll bring them in a little bit. So then we also have another one here on the bottom. So if we hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view and kind of zoom in here, let's hold down the Z button and go to wireframe, and you can see we have one here. But this one, I'm actually going to basically duplicate it from the first one, and we're just going to stick it inside. So let's go back to solid view, and I'm going to go to the face select, and we're going to hold down the Shift and Alt key and select that loop there on the edge. So it selects the entire thing, and then Shift Alt select that there. And then we're just going to hold down the Shift key and select those two faces. So we're going to duplicate it by hitting Shift D, and we're going to bring it down the Z axis. And then we can also scale the entire thing up. So S to scale along the Z axis. So it's a little bit taller. So let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view. We're going to rotate it and then bring it over here. Now what I want to do is flip it so it's going in the opposite direction. So I'm going to hit S to scale. We're going to hit Y to scale it on the Y axis, and then I can type -1 and enter. So it's now flipped, and then we need to hit Shift N to recalculate the normals. And we had to recalculate the normals because we flipped the object, so we basically flipped it inside out, so the back faces were on the front. So let's now hold down the Z button, and we're going to move our mouse to wireframe, and we're going to rotate it and scale it and just like stick it right in there. And it actually fits pretty good. If you want to change any of the modeling, you can. So if you go to side view, you can go to the vertex select. You can box select the vertices and maybe move them in, something like that. Maybe hold down the Alt key and select that loop, and then double tap G and edge slide it forward a little bit. But I'll hold down the Z button and go to solid view. And there we go, we now have that little bottom fin there. Let's hit Control S to save. And we'll hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and we'll hold down the Z button and go back into wireframe. So you can see we have another bit here, but this one actually has 2 on either side. So now what I'm going to be doing is deleting half of it and adding a mirror modifier. So we'll press the 7 on the numpad, and that is going to go to top view, or you can click on the little Z there on the gizmo to go to top view. So we will hit Tab to go to edit mode. And let's deselect everything. So double tap A to deselect. And I want to zoom in really close so we can see it. And we're going to hit B for the box select. And I'm going to drag here to box select the half side. So let's navigate over here and I'll hit B to box select. We're going to box select that there. We'll hit B and we're going to box select those vertices there. And then hit B and we're going to box select those vertices there. And hit B again. Box select those vertices. Let's navigate over here. So again, to pan, hold down the Shift key and then middle click to pan. So we'll hit B, and we can definitely zoom out farther now. I was just zooming in really close because of those vertices. They were really close to the center. So on top view, let's box select the last few vertices here. And then if I zoom in really close, we just want to make sure we box select those vertices. So we'll hit X to delete, and we're going to delete the vertices. So let's hold down the Z button and go to solid view. So we have half the shark. So we are going to go here to the modifiers. So the wrench icon is the modifiers panel. And we're going to click on add modifier. And we are going to search for the mirror, and we're going to add the mirror modifier. And then we want the mirror to be merged in the very center where it meets the mirror. So we're going to click on the clipping button. So now I want to fill in a few of the holes. So we're going to zoom in really close to the front of the shark. And we're going to hold down the Shift key and select all of these vertices. So Shift select the front vertices, and we're going to extrude them out and extrude them into the center. And then we can scale it down a bit. So let's hit the 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and we'll go to wireframe view by holding the Z button down. And we can box select these vertices and hit G and drag it out. Box select this vertex, bring it out. And we're just going to make a very like pointy front here. Maybe we can scale everything. So box select the front, and then we'll scale everything on the Y-axis to flatten it a little bit. And if we box select all of these vertices, we'll drag it back a little bit. All right, let's hold down the Z button, go to solid view. And then what we want to do is fill the holes here. So if we hold down the Shift key, we'll first select the top vertex. Then we'll hold down the Shift key and select the other two. And we'll press the F key. Then we're going to Shift select these vertices and press the F key. So if you just hit Tab to go to object mode, kind of zoom out there, you can see we have a nice pointy front there. Let's navigate right down here to the mouth, and we will hit Tab to go back into edit mode. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key and we're going to select all of these vertices here, but not the ones which are touching the mirror. And we're going to hit E to extrude, and we're going to hit X and bring it in on the X axis so it merges with the mirror, because we have the clipping button turned on so it merges with the mirror. Then we can select this vertex and then shift select the other vertices, and we'll press F to fill in that triangle, and we'll select this vertex, hold down the shift key and select the other vertices, and then press F to fill in that triangle. All right, so let's now just pan over here, and we'll zoom over here to the very end here, and I'm going to hold down the shift key and select these vertices here, and we'll extrude them out and in like that, so they're just kind of popping out a little bit. And then if we hold down the shift key and select these 4 vertices, we'll hit F, and then we'll select these 4 vertices and hit F. Now all those holes there are filled. So let's hit Control S to save. So now what I want to do is model those little fins there, and because we have the mirror modifier, it'll mirror one side over to the other side. So the next thing that I want to do, if I hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view and kind of zoom in here, I want to make this little fin, and this fin is going to come out this way, so there's going to be 2 fins on each side. So let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view. We're going to hold down the Z button and go into wireframe. And I want to add another loop cut here. So we're going to have a loop cut at the starting and then in the end. So if we hit tab to go to edit mode, we'll hit Control R to add a loop cut, and I will left click, drag over, and then left click there. So I'll hold down the Z button and go back to the solid view. Now let's navigate right here, and we're going to select this vertex and then shift select this vertex. And we're going to press Control B. So Control B is going to add a bevel to it. So it's basically making this bigger and then just merging this together. So we're going to use that to create the shape of it. So let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view. We'll hold down the Z button and go to wireframe. And we're going to select these vertices and maybe just move them in a little bit. And select these vertices and bring them in a little bit. And then maybe these vertices here, if we select these 2 vertices, we'll double tap G and edge slide them down. And then we'll go to the face select, and we're going to hold down the shift key and select these 3 faces. So let's press the 1 on the numpad, and that's going to go to front view, or you can hit the -Y to go to front view. And we're going to extrude it out. And then we're going to scale it down a bit, like that. And let's just go to solid view. So hold down the Z button and go to solid view, because I think it'll be a little bit easier to do this in the solid view. So let's rotate it and bring it down a bit. And then we will extrude it and rotate it and scale it down a little bit. We can also hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view. And we need to rotate this way over like that. And then we'll extrude it again and scale it way down. Bring this down a little bit. So we're just going to have to move the selection down and kind of fix the rotation because it's a little bit cocked and weird. So let's just hit G to grab and bring this over, scale it down, and then we will go to the face select. We're going to select this face. We're going to scale it down and then bring it forward a little bit. So it kind of rounds over a little bit. All right, just like that. So then let's go to the vertex select. We're going to hold down the Alt key and select that loop of vertices. And we'll hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view. And let's double tap G and edge slide it up a bit and then scale it up a little bit. Let's now hold down the Alt key and select that loop there. And we'll hold down the Z button and move our mouse into wireframe. And we'll hit G to grab and bring it over and then scale it up a little bit more. Go back to solid view. So we now have those little tiny fins there on the back of the shark. So we'll hit Control S to save. Now I want to model the big fins. So let's hit 3 to go to side view. We'll hold down the Z button and go to wireframe. And we're going to go into edit mode and we want to add some loops here. So let's hold down the shift key and select these 2 loops. And we'll double tap G and edge slide it forward a bit. And then we'll add a loop cut here. So we'll hit Control R and we'll just left click and then left click there. And then we're going to select this loop and shift select this loop. And we're going to double tap G and edge slide them down. And then we select this loop and shift select this loop. We'll double tap G so it edge slides along the edge there. And now let's add a loop here in the center. So we'll hit Control R and we're going to left click and right click so it stays in the center. And then if we hold down the shift key, we'll select both of these vertices and we'll scale them down. And then if we hold down the shift key and select these vertices, we'll scale them down. All right, so that's going to be where the fin comes out. So let's go to the face select and we're going to hold down the shift key and select these 2 faces. Now this is a bit easier to do on top view. So I'm going to hit 7 on the numpad to go to top view. And let's maybe rotate this and pull it out slightly. And then we're going to extrude it out. Let's hit the 1 on the numpad to go to front view. And we want to hit R to rotate and G to grab and just kind of bring it up a bit. We can rotate it down later, but it's easier to model if we just model it straight out. So we'll hit 7 on the numpad to go to top view. And let's maybe scale it up a bit. And we'll extrude it out. and then start to scale it down and extrude out again and scale it down a bit more. And we'll hit G to grab and bring it over because the front I want to round over, but the back I want to be more straight. So we'll hit E to extrude and then S to scale and then G to grab and pull it back. And then we'll just do it one more time. So extrude it, scale it down and bring it over. So let's now click here to go to the vertex select and I'll zoom in and I'll deselect everything. And then we'll just click B for the box select and we'll just box select the vertices here and I'll hit G to grab and move it over and then hit B for the box select those vertices and we'll hit R to rotate and G to grab and bring that over so it's a bit more sharp. All right, let's hit 7 to go to top view and we can click and drag to box select these vertices and bring them over a little bit. And we can kind of use that red line there kind of as a reference to make sure that it's about straight. So let's now add a loop cut here. So I'll hit Control R and we're going to left click, drag over, and then left click there. And then if we box select just the back vertices, we'll hit G to grab and bring it over a little bit. All right, just like that. So let's hold down the Z button and go back to solid view. And you can see it looks a little bit thick, so I want to make it thinner. So we'll just hold down the shift key and we're going to select all of these vertices here. So hold down shift, select those vertices, and we'll hit G to grab and bring it down on the Z axis. And then we can also hit S and Z. So S to scale and bring it in on the Z axis. So just squish it down. Now I also want to scale this way down because it's way too thick. So we'll go to the face select and I'll hold down the shift key and select these faces. And we're going to scale them along the Z axis just to squish that, scale that down. Select this face, we'll scale it along the Z axis. We're just going to squish these faces down so it's a lot more thin. And then the back here, we're going to select this face and this face and this face and also scale this down on the Z axis. Select this face, scale it on the Z axis. Then if we click here to go to the edge select, we're going to select this edge and we'll scale this down on the Z axis. And we're going to do the same thing for this edge. All right, so now let's hold down the shift key and we're going to select these top edges again. And let's also shift select the bottom edges like that. We want to scale it along the Z axis just to flatten it right down there. We'll select this loop, maybe shift select this loop and scale them up a little bit so it's a little bit thicker as it gets closer to the body. So now if we hit V3 on the numpad to go to side view, you can see if I hold down the Z button and move my mouse over to wireframe, it kind of goes down a little bit. So to rotate it down, we want to hit 1 on the numpad to go to front view. We're going to click here to go to the vertex select. We're going to deselect everything and hit B for the box select and box select all of these vertices to select the entire fin. And we're going to hit R to rotate and then G to grab, R to rotate, G to grab. We're just going to make the fin kind of going down a bit. Let's hit 3 on the numpad to go back to side view. And I also want to bring the fin over a little bit. So we'll just hit 7 on the numpad to go to top view and we'll rotate it and move it back. So R to rotate and G to grab. So the fin kind of goes back and down. And it doesn't need to be exactly to the reference. You can see that is pretty close. So I'll go to solid view. I just want to make sure it mainly looks good from the perspective view. So maybe hit tab to go back to object mode, kind of zoom out and just take a look at it. Now I actually feel like the entire shark is slightly thin. So if I hit tab to go to edit mode and then hit A to select everything, let's hit G and then click with our middle mouse wheel and just drag the entire shark away from the mirror slightly. And then we can scale it along the X axis and just make the entire shark a little bit thicker. All right, like that. But we don't want to scale it up too much because if we scale it up too much, you can see the back is going to kind of flatten. So make sure you don't scale that up too much. But I just thought the shark could be a little bit thicker. All right, so that is pretty good. Now you can see this part here looks a little bit sharp. So if I hit tab to go into edit mode, I can maybe select this vertex here and double tap G and just kind of edge slide it down a bit. Select this loop, double tap G and edge slide it down a little bit, something like that. All right, so that is the main body. So now what I want to do is add the eyes and the teeth, and then we'll add the materials. So in the same objects edit mode, I will hit Shift A, or you can go to the add menu by clicking on add, and we want to add an icosphere. And then what we want to do is click here on the clipping button to turn off the clipping, and that way it won't merge with the mirror. So I'll hit G to grab and pull it out from the mirror, and then S to scale and scale it down. And then we'll click on this button here to turn back on clipping, and we'll hit G to grab. Let's bring it close to the shark. Let's now hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view. We should also hit Control S to save the project. And I'm going to hold down the Z button and move my mouse to wireframe. And I'll zoom in and I'll hit G to grab and move it here and then S to scale and just stick it right there. So let's now hit the period on the numpad to zoom into the shark, or the shark eye. Let's hold down the Z button and go back to solid view, and then just bring it along the x-axis, so G to grab, and then click with your middle mouse wheel to constrain it to the x-axis. All right, so now we have the shark eye. So now I want to model some teeth, so we'll hit Shift-A for the add menu, and we're going to add a cube in edit mode. Again, we want to click on the check mark there to turn off clipping, and we'll scale the cube down and bring it forward, and then we'll click on that button to turn back on clipping. So let's now hit G to grab and bring it over, and S to scale it down, scale along the Z-axis, and then let's bring it forward. So we now want to go to the face select, and I want to zoom in here and select this face, and we'll scale the face down and maybe bring the face up a little bit. So let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and we'll scale it down and bring it up. And then we're going to hit E to extrude, and R to rotate, and G to grab, and then scale it down way more, like that. And I think I want it to curve around one more time. So let's go to the vertex select. We're gonna go into wireframe. So hold down the Z button, go to wireframe, and we're gonna box select these vertices. Let's bring it down and scale it down a bit. And then we can hit E to extrude, R to rotate, and then G to grab, and we'll S to scale that up. So we now have a nice curved tooth there. Now, if I want to select the entire tooth, we can hover our mouse over the tooth and hit the L key to select the linked vertices, and I'll hold down the Z button and go back to solid view. And I'm now going to rotate the tooth and just bring the tooth right up there, and we're going to bring it over and scale it up a bit and just stick it on the edge of the mouth there. Now, to duplicate our selection so we can have more teeth, we're going to hit Shift D. So Shift D to duplicate, let's bring it right there, and maybe rotate it, and then Shift D to duplicate, we'll scale it down a little bit, and then Shift D to duplicate, S to scale, bring it up like that, Shift D to duplicate, and we're just gonna scale them down as they get closer to the very front. So duplicate that again, and then one more time, Shift D to duplicate, put that right there. All right, so we'll hit Shift D to duplicate again, and this time I want to rotate it around, so we'll hit R to rotate that around, and then what we can do is rotate it along the Z-axis, and we're going to rotate that all the way around, and then we'll go to front view and we'll just kind of reposition that. You can also double tap the R key, and if you double tap R, that's going to use the trackball rotation, and you can just fix that. So let's scale it up a bit, and we'll rotate it and stick it right there. So stick the teeth right there in the mouth, and we'll scale it up a bit, and then again we'll hit Shift D to duplicate, and S to scale, and G to grab, and then Shift D to duplicate. We're just gonna have a couple more teeth here on the front. So bring that in there, Shift D to duplicate, and we'll have one more teeth there, maybe rotate these teeth. Let's hit Control S to save. So we'll now hit Shift D to duplicate, and let's bring this back here and scale it up a little bit. And we're just gonna have a few more teeth back here. So Shift D to duplicate one more time, maybe rotate it, and we'll just stick it right there. So we'll hit Tab to go back to object mode and just take a look at the final modeling. Let's hit Control S to save. So that's good. So let's now just do some simple materials. So let's hold down the Z button and go into the material preview so we can see the materials. So let's click here to go to the material properties, and we're going to click on new to add a new material, and I can just call this shark skin, hit enter. And then for the base color, we're going to make it very slightly towards the blue. So blue's over here, we'll make it very slightly towards the blue, but then we're going to make it darker. So it's kind of a very slightly blue, but it's mostly gray. And I want to make that even a little bit darker, so on the base color, make that a bit darker. All right, so let's now hit Tab to go to edit mode. We're going to deselect everything with the A key, and we're going to hit the L key with our mouse hovered over the eye. We'll click on the plus to add a new material. We'll click on new, and on the material here, we're going to type shark eye, hit enter, and we're going to turn the roughness down, so drag the roughness value down so it's a shiny eye, so it looks more wet, and we'll click on the base color and make it all the way black. And I actually forgot to hit the assign button, so with the entire eye selected, click on the assign button. So now if we go back to object mode, by hitting tab, if you zoom in here, you can see there's that nice little reflection there, kind of in the lighting. Let's hit tab to go into edit mode. And what we're going to do is hit the L key to select the entire shark, and then also hit the L key to select that piece. So we have everything selected except the teeth. Now what I can do is press Control I. So Control I is going to invert the selection so we have all the teeth selected. So we'll click on the plus, we'll click on new, we're going to call this shark teeth, and then we'll click on the assign button. And as for the base color, I'll just make it slightly darker, and I'll also turn the roughness down. All right, so we'll deselect everything. And now what I want to do is just select the kind of parts for the belly because the belly is going to be lighter. So we'll go to the face select and we're going to select this face and shift select these faces, just holding down the shift key, and we're going to select those faces and those faces. All right, hold down the shift key, select those faces all the way down there and over here, and we'll select those faces. You can also hit B for the box select and like box select those faces there, hit B and box select those faces, and then hold down the shift key, select those faces. And we can also hit the L key with our mouse hovered over that piece to select that one. And then again, just hold down the shift key and select those faces there. So we'll now click on the plus, we'll click on new, we're going to click on the assign button so it's white. And if we double click on this to rename it, we're going to rename this to shark belly. And then for this, we're going to click on the base color. We're going to make it kind of like a light gray. So just like that. And then maybe make it very, very slightly towards the blue. I think that just looks a little bit nice. So it's going to be a nice light gray, something like that. And then we'll hit tab to go back into edit mode. And we want to make like the inside of the mouth. So I'm going to select the face there and then shift, select the other faces inside the mouth. We're going to click on the plus, we'll click on new, we'll click on assign to assign those faces to that material. We'll double click on this to rename it and call it shark mouth. And then for this, we're going to make the base color kind of a peachy tannish color. So kind of pink, but also kind of like orange. And then we also need to select this one here and then click on assign. Oops, that's the wrong one. So click on the shark mouth and then click on assign. So now I do want to be able to see a little bit more of that pink color. So I'm going to hit the K button for the knife tool, and I'm going to click here and then click here and then click there and there and there. And we're basically just cutting this out. So cut there and there and there and down there. And then, so we cut it at the wrong spot. So what we want to do is cut it there. So click back here and then click there. And at the very end, click there and hit enter. Now I accidentally cut 2 cuts here. So if I just hold down the shift key and select both those faces, I can hit F to fill a face. Now also the topology isn't super great right here because like this has a bunch of extra loops there. You can kind of see there isn't really a cut here. So if I hit K for the knife tool, we'll click here and then click there. And then we'll just bring this up to the top, click there and hit enter, just so the topology is a bit nicer. So now what we can do is just hold down the shift key and select all of these faces right around here. So basically we're kind of making some lips. Okay, so we're going to select all those. And then lastly, we're just going to shift select one of the faces, which has the shark mouth. So it selects that material and we'll click on assign. So we'll deselect everything. Now the last thing, if I navigate right over here and zoom in, you can see this part here, I want it to kind of curve down. So we're going to hit K for the knife tool and we're going to click here and then we're going to click there and hit enter. So it kind of curves down. So now if we select that triangle, we'll select the shark belly and click on the assign button. So we'll zoom out and hit tab to go back to object mode, and we'll press the period on the numpad to zoom into the object. So there we go, we now have a really nice low poly shark. And if you want to, you could apply the mirror modifier. I will apply it by clicking on the drop down and applying it. But of course you don't have to apply it. If you don't want to apply it, you don't need to apply the mirror. If you think you might edit it later, then you could just keep the mirror. So let's hit Control S to save. And then we're going to hit the H key to hide the shark. And then we're going to hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view. And then we're going to select the shark reference image and press H to hide it. So we'll hit Control S to save the project. So now let's model the dog. So I'm going to hit the 3 on the number pad to go to side view. And then from our file browser, we can just drag and drop in the dog reference image. So now you can see it's right here on side view, and I'll hit G to grab and I'll move it here into the center, maybe scale it up a little bit. We can change the scale of the model later. And I'm actually going to bring it a little bit farther down like this. So the center of the body is kind of in the center of the scene. Now, if your 3D cursor is in the center of the scene, you can press Shift C, and that will bring the 3D cursor into the center. That way when we add a new object, the new object is going to be in the center. So we can now click here on the add menu, or we can press Shift A. And I'm going to go to mesh and we're going to add a cube. So let's hit the tab key to go into edit mode, and I will scale the cube down. So hit S to scale it down. And then let's also navigate over here to side view, and I'm going to add a loop cut by pressing Control R. And I'll left click and right click so the loop cut stays in the center there. Now what we want to do is go to the face select. So click up here and we're going to select this face, and we'll hit X or the delete button, and we're going to delete the vertices, and that way it'll delete that whole half side. So now let's click over here to go to the modifier properties, which is the wrench icon. we'll click on add modifier, and we're going to add the mirror modifier. And so it's already mirroring over on the x-axis. So then let's turn on the clipping button so it merges with the mirror. So I now want to add a loop cut here. So let's press Ctrl R, and I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel until there are 2 cuts, and I will left click and then right click so they stay in the center. So I'm now going to click here to go to the edge select, and then I'm going to select this edge and then hold down the shift key and select this edge, and we'll bring the edges out. And then if I select this edge and this edge, let's hit G to grab, and then click with our middle mouse wheel to bring them in on the x-axis. So now if we press the A key to select everything, we'll hit G, and then click down with the middle mouse wheel to constrain it to the x-axis and bring it in. We can also scale it a bit on the x-axis, like that. And then we'll select this edge, and we will double tap the G key to edge slide it, and we'll edge slide it down. And then we'll select this edge here and double tap G to edge slide and edge slide it down. So let's now go to the face select. So click here, and then we're going to select this face and shift select this face and hold down the shift key and select this face. And I'll hit the 3 on the number pad, and that's going to go to side view. And I'll hit G to grab, and we'll move it back, and then S to scale, and we'll scale it up a bit, and R to rotate. Let's hold down the Z button and then move our mouse over to the wireframe and let go of the Z button. So we'll hit E to extrude, and then we'll hit R to rotate and G to grab. And I'm actually going to rotate it back and bring it back a bit because I actually want to have another loop here before the dog's kind of shoulders and legs. So we'll scale this up a bit and just stick it right there. Now we'll hit E to extrude again, and then R to rotate and G to grab, and S to scale, and we're going to just stick it right there. And then we'll hit E to extrude, and then R to rotate, and then G to grab, and then S to scale, and just scale that in there so it fits the dog's neck. We'll keep on extruding up the neck by hitting E to extrude, and then S to scale, R to rotate it, and G to grab, and just stick it right there. So let's middle click with our mouse wheel to move over here, and we'll hold down the Z button and move our mouse back to solid view just to see how that's looking. And then I want the neck to get thinner, so I'll hit G to grab and just bring the neck in a little bit so it's kind of getting thinner as it goes into the body. Let's also hit the A key to select everything, and we'll hit G and then hit X and bring everything in a little bit on the X-axis. So it just brought in a little bit. So now let's go to the back, and I'm going to select the back and hold down the shift key and select both of these faces. And I'll hit 3 on the number pad to go to side view, and I'll hold down the Z button and move my mouse to wireframe and let go. And I'll hit G to grab, and then S to scale, and R to rotate. And we're just going to put that one there. Then we'll extrude out again, and we'll make a smaller one here, scale that down a bit. And then I'll hit E to extrude again, and R to rotate, and G to grab. And we're going to want to think about modeling the hips and then modeling the back legs here. So let's start to scale this down, and then we'll hit E to extrude again, and S to scale. And then this back part here, I'm going to just have this turn into the tail. So we'll start to scale it down and bring it up, and then E to extrude and S to scale. Let's press 7 on the numpad, and that's going to go to top view, and I'm going to bring the tail in so it's much smaller, like that. So I'll now hit 3 on the numpad to go back to side view, and I can rotate it, and then we'll again extrude it with E. We'll rotate it and move it down, and we'll scale it down a bit. So we'll extrude this, rotate it, and move it over, and then extrude it, scale it down, rotate it, and move it up here, and then extrude again, scale it down, and then we'll extrude it one more time and scale it down even smaller. All right, let's hold down the Z button and move our mouse back to solid view. And there we go, we now have a nice tail. And because we kind of scaled it down and brought it in, the scale is a bit better. But if you want to, you could also just like hold down the Alt key and then select a loop there and maybe bring the loop in a little bit or scale it down a little bit if it's a little bit too thick. Let's hit the 3 on the numpad to go to side view. So right here, we kind of have like the dog's thighs and the back legs. So I want to model this. So let's hold down the Z button, move our mouse into wireframe. We want to click here to go to the vertex select, and we're going to click and drag just to box select the back here and maybe just bring it forward a little bit. Now I want to add a loop cut. So let's hit Ctrl R to add a loop cut, and I will left click and then right click so the loop stays where it is. And then I will scale the loop up a bit and kind of bring it down here. And then we can click and drag just to box select these vertices, and we'll rotate them and move them over here. So R to rotate and G to grab. And then we're going to add another loop right here. So Control R, and we're going to left click and right click so they stay in the center. Maybe bring these up just a little bit. So we're going to shape that. So we're going to select this vertex and shift select this vertex. So we have both of them selected, and we're going to double tap G and edge slide this up and then rotate it a bit. We'll select this and maybe bring it over. So we want to be kind of a round shape. So let's hold down the Z button and go back to solid view so you can kind of see the shape that I'm starting to get here. So it's kind of an oval. So I'll hit G to grab, move that over, and we'll select this vertex and double tap G to edge slide. Select this and double tap G to edge slide. Maybe bring this over. All right, there we go. So that's where the leg is going to come out. Maybe also bring that back a little bit. So let's click here to go to the face select, and we're going to hold down the shift key and select these three faces. We're going to hit E to extrude, click there. Let's hit the 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and we're going to rotate it and bring it over. And let's rotate it again and kind of scale it down and rotate it over. And then to scale it flat, we can hit S, and then we can hit Z, and then we can type 0 and enter, and that's going to flatten it. Let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and you can see we need to move it over a lot. So I'll hold down the Z button and move our mouse into wireframe and let go. And I'll rotate it and move it over and scale it up, kind of like that. And I think what I want to do is just move the entire thing over a little bit. So if we click here to go to the vertex select, we can click and drag to select all these vertices. And I'll hit G, and we're just going to drag them over a little bit farther because it was a little bit too far forward. All right. So now I'll click and drag to box select these vertices and then hit B and box select those. So we have the bottom leg, and we'll rotate it. And then we're going to extrude it down. So hit E, and then we're going to scale it down and rotate it and move it over. Let's also hit the 1 on the numpad to go to front view. Make sure that's looking good. So if I hold down the Z button, go into solid view, that's looking pretty good. Although right here, it does kind of come in a little bit. So I think what I'll do is hold down the shift key and select these vertices and that vertex. And we're going to double tap G to edge slide it. So it kind of goes in more to the dog. So it's a bit thicker. All right, that's good. So let's go to the face select by clicking up here. And then we're going to hold down the shift key and select these three faces. And we'll hit the 3 on the numpad to go to side view. And we can click up here or hit Z and go into wireframe. And we're going to extrude it again. And then we'll scale it down and rotate it and move it over. And extrude again and rotate it. And this time we'll scale it up a little bit. And then extrude again, scale it down, rotate it and move it over like that. And then extrude down again. All right, so now we're getting to the feet. So let's extrude down again, and we'll start to rotate it and scale it up a little bit. And then we'll extrude it again, rotate it all the way over, scale it down and rotate it and bring it over there. All right, so now we definitely need to shape the feet. So I'll hold down the Z button and move my mouse back to solid view. So we definitely want to shape the feet better. So we'll scale everything up. So hit S and then X, we'll scale it along the X axis like that. Then if we click here to go to the face select, we're going to select this face and then shift select the other faces. So they're all, the bottom faces are selected. And we're going to scale them, and we're going to scale them on the Z axis. And we're going to type 0 and then enter just to flatten the feet. Let's hit 3 on the numpad for side view and just make sure that the feet are as far down as they need to be. And then we also want to make the front of the feet look a bit better. So I'll middle click to move over here. And we can add a loop cut here by pressing Ctrl R and then left clicking and right clicking so it stays in the center. So now let's go to the edge select and we'll select this edge and we'll bring the edge down on the Z axis. We can also select this edge and bring it down on the Z axis. And then you can see right down here how the topology is. You can see it ends right here, but I want the topology to be connecting. So we'll use the K button. So hit K for the knife tool, and we're going to click here and then click down right there. And where is it? It should snap. So if you just move your mouse or scroll in right there. So just click there and it should snap, and then hit enter. And then we're going to hit K. And we're going to move our mouse there. You might need to zoom in closer to get it to snap. And then you can navigate up here. And we want to click right there and hit enter, just so the topology is a bit better. Now, if I click here to go to the vertex select, or you can press the 1 on the top of your keyboard for the vertex select, I just want to hit G to grab and move this around. Yeah, and you can see we have some overlapping vertices. So I want to press the A key to select all the mesh, and we're going to press the M key, and we're going to merge by distance. And this way you can see it got rid of those 2 extra vertices. So if I select a vertex and move it around, you can see there isn't any overlapping vertices. So we'll go to the face select, we'll select this face, we'll hit G and then click with our middle mouse wheel to bring it out, just like that. So now you can see the feet are a lot more round. You can go back to object mode by hitting tab and zooming way out and just taking a look at that. That's looking a lot better. So let's hit the tab key to go back into edit mode, and we're going to model the front feet. Also press Ctrl S to save the project, and let's hit the 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and I'll hold down the Z button and move my mouse into the wireframe, and I want to add another loop in here so we have more topology. So I'll hit Ctrl R right here, and I'll left click and right click so the loop stays in the center. Now what I want to do is take these two loops here and put these two loops roughly kind of where the dog's kind of front legs are. So I'm going to click and drag to box select these loops, and we'll double tap G and edge slide them up, maybe rotate them and move them back. And then if we box select these loops, we'll maybe bring them up. We can box select these loops and drag them over a little bit. All right, so maybe bring these back a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is go to the edge select, and I'm going to select this edge. And let's go back to solid view. So hold down the Z button and go to solid view. So right here, just select that edge. And we're going to press Control B. So Control B is going to add a bevel. So we'll make a big bevel like that. Click there. And now I want to shape this so it's more circular. So let's go to the face select. We'll select this face and we'll drag the face back a little bit. And we'll select this face and drag it in a little bit. All right. Let's go to the vertex select, and I'll select the vertex, and I'll double tap G to edge slide and double tap G to edge slide. And let's also maybe drag this in a bit, and we can select these two loops and double tap G to edge slide. We just want to make this more of a circular shape. So I'm just selecting the vertices, kind of moving them towards each other. We can also select these two vertices, double tap G to edge slide it out a bit. All right, bring that in, bring that up. Maybe select this and bring it up a little bit more. And we'll hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, so you can see that's where the leg is going to come out. So I'll select the face select. We're going to select this face and then shift select the other faces, and we're going to hit E to extrude. Let's click there. We'll hit 1 on the numpad to go to front view. We're going to rotate it and bring it over. And what you can do is double tap R, and double tap R will use the trackball rotation, and you can kind of rotate it around. And then we want to scale it on the Z axis. So hit S and then Z and type 0 and enter just to flatten it. And then I do want to make the whole leg a little bit farther up. So if I go to the edge select, I can click and then shift click on all of these edges here. So shift select all these edges all the way around, and I'll hit G to grab and maybe drag them up a little bit like that. Maybe select these edges and double tap G to edge slide it, and double tap G to edge slide that out and that up. Something like that. You can also click here to go to the face select and then select the face and maybe drag that face out a little bit. All right, now with the face select turned on, we're going to select these 3 faces on the bottom, and let's scale them down a bit. We'll hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view. We want to scale these down quite a bit more thin. Let's hold down the Z button and move our mouse into wireframe. And then we'll hit E to extrude and S to scale and G to grab. And we'll rotate that over. And then we'll extrude it down again, scale it down a bit more, and then extrude it down, rotate it. And we're going to do pretty much the same thing that we did for these back feet. So we'll extrude it and rotate it and move it over. And then extrude it, rotate it and move it over. Just like that. So I'll hold down the Z button, go back to solid view so we can take a look what we've made. All right. Now I think I might want to select like a face like here and a face here and maybe these faces here. And we can scale them up a bit on the X-axis just so it's a little bit thicker. I'm going to hit tab to go back to object mode and just kind of zoom out farther away. And I might want to edge slide a few of these. So if I go back into edit mode, I could go to the vertex select. I could select a vertex and double tap G to edge slide and edge slide that over, just so it looks a little bit nicer. So let's navigate down here to the feet, and we want to go to the face select. We're going to select these 2 faces, and I want to scale them on the Z axis by 0 and then enter to flatten it. Now there is a problem with this, and that is that now there's that little face there that we squished. So let's hit Control Z to undo that. So what I'm going to do is select this face and shift select this face, and we'll hit X and we're going to delete the faces. So now if we select this face and shift select this face, we're going to scale the bottom faces along the Z axis by 0 and hit enter. So now we can add a loop cut here, but first let's fill the faces. So if we go to the vertex select, we're going to select this vertex and then shift select the other vertices around it. And we're going to hit F to fill a face. Let's now hit K for the knife tool, and we're going to click down here and then click up here and then hit enter. So now it is filled. So now what we want to do is just kind of shape it. We could also add a loop cut right here by pressing Control R and left clicking and right clicking so the loop stays where it is. So we can select this vertex and hit G and drag it down. Maybe select this vertex and hit G and drag it back. And this vertex and this vertex, G to grab and move it back. You can click with your middle mouse wheel to constrain it on the Y axis. And then select these 2 loops. And we'll hit G and bring them forward on the Y axis. Maybe let's go to the face select. And we're going to select these 2 faces and maybe these 2 faces. So shift select those faces and we'll hit G and then Z and bring it down on the Z axis. All right, so we're starting to get a better shape for the feet. Maybe we can go to the vertex select and then hold down the Alt key and select that loop of vertices, and we'll scale the loops, and we'll scale the loops on the X-axis. So scale it up like that so it's a little bit thicker. All right, let's go back to object mode, and let's go to side view by hitting 3 on the numpad, see how that's looking. And I think maybe I will go back into edit mode by hitting tab, and I will hit Z, move my mouse over to wireframe and let go, and then I can click and drag to box select the vertices there and maybe rotate them and move them down a bit. And then maybe box select these loops here. And what I actually want to do is make sure that the dog's feet are at the same position. So if we press the 1 on the numpad to go to front view and we zoom in here, you can see it should be brought down a little bit farther. So I'll hit G and then Z and bring that down so that the feet are at the same length. All right, let's hold down the Z button, go back to solid view. And then one more thing that I think we could do is just make the feet a little bit bigger. So if I hold down Z, go to wireframe, let go, I can click and drag to box select the entire feet and maybe scale them up a little bit and move them up a little bit, just they're a little bit thicker. And then on front view, we can bring it down on the Z axis like that. So I will hit Z and then move my mouse to solid view, and I will hit tab to go back to object mode, and that's good for the feet. So let's hit Control S to save. So we now want to model the head. So we'll go back into edit mode by hitting tab, and we're going to click here to go to the face select, and we're going to select this face and then hold down the shift key and select these faces. And I'll press 3 on the numpad to go to side view and then scroll wheel to zoom in. And let's go to the wireframe. So we're going to hit E to extrude, click there, and then rotate this and scale up a bit like that. And then E to extrude, R to rotate, and G to grab, kind of scale it down a little bit. E to extrude, S to scale, and we're going to just bring that down. And then we'll extrude this out again, almost to the very end. Maybe just bring this back a little bit, kind of rotate it over a little bit. So this is where the bottom of the mouth is. And then extrude out again and scale it down and bring it up a little bit. So now we want to basically cut out the mouth. So we're going to use the knife tool for this. So we'll hit K for the knife tool, and we want it to cut through the entire mesh. So we're going to press the C button, and the C button is going to turn on the cut through. So we'll click there, and then we'll go down here and over here, and then we'll click like right down there, and then we'll hit enter. So now what we can do is go into solid view. We can select these faces and we'll hit X and delete the faces, and also select this face and we'll hit X and delete the faces. So now that they're separate, we can kind of shape them individually. So I'll hit 3 to go to side view. Let's go to the vertex select, and we'll hold down the Z button and go to wireframe, and we can box select these loops, and we'll bring them over by hitting G, selecting these loops, bring them over, select these loops, maybe bring them down a little bit, select this loop and bring it back, box select these loops and hit G and kind of bring them down. We can also select these loops and then double tap G to edge slide it and bring it down there, just to kind of shape it to the bottom of the mouth. And maybe bring this up a little bit. And we can also box select this bottom part and kind of rotate it slightly. All right, so it's a bit more smooth. All right, box select this loop and maybe bring that up a little bit. And we can box select these loops and bring them down a bit and just kind of shape this to the front of the dog, kind of the dog's nose. All right, that's a lot better. So we'll hold down the Z button and go back to solid view. That's looking a lot better. Now inside here, I also want to make kind of the dog's nose get a lot more thin because it's definitely too thick. So we're going to go to the face select and we'll shift select these two faces. And we'll hit G and then bring it in on the Y-axis, actually the X-axis, and then hold down the Shift key and select these two faces and hit G and then X and bring it in on the X-axis. So the dog's kind of nose there gets a bit more thin. Maybe that's a little bit too far, so bring it out a little bit. And then we can do the same thing here for the mouth because the mouth should get thinner. So we're going to Shift select these two faces and we'll hit G and then bring it in on the X-axis. We could also scale it on the X-axis if we want to. And maybe go to the face select, or actually the vertex select. We can select this vertex and hit G and bring it out a little bit so it's a bit more round. And maybe select this vertex and bring it out a little bit. Maybe we could also select this vertex and then shift select this vertex and double tap G to edge slide it up a little bit. All right, maybe select this vertex and then shift select these 3 vertices here and double tap G to edge slide it back so it rounds over a little bit more. So now I want to fill in the center there of the mouth. So we're going to select this loop or that vertex and then shift select these other vertices and we'll hit E and we're going to bring them in on the X-axis until they connect so they merge with the mirror. Then we can select this vertex and shift select these vertices and we'll hit E and bring it in on the X-axis like that so it merges. Now if we hold down the Shift key, select this triangle, We'll hit F to fill a face, select this loop or that edge, and then shift select the other vertices and hit F. And then right here, we want to select these 4 vertices. So shift select the 4 vertices and press F. So now if we hit tab to go back to object mode, just take a look at that. Now the dog's mouth is nice and filled. Now this here is kind of a little bit sharp. So if I go back into edit mode, I want to select this loop and maybe just bring it in a bit. That looks a lot better. So it's not quite as sharp going back. So now let's make the dog's nose. So I'm going to zoom in here to the center of where the dog's nose is, and I'll hit the K button for the knife tool. And I'm going to click here and then click over here, then click here, and then we'll go in right there, and then we'll go down and then over. Click there and hit enter. Now the topology for these faces really aren't that good because really optimally a face should have 4 vertices, but this has a lot. So we'll hit K for the knife tool again, and we're going to click here, click there and hit enter, and then K for the knife tool, and we'll click here and then click on the end and hit enter just so the topology is a little bit better. And then one more thing that I want to do is hit the K button for the knife tool again, and we're going to click there and then click down there and hit enter just to add another loop there. So now let's go to the edge select, and I'm going to select this edge, and let's rotate the edge and bring it down a little bit, kind of like that. Then we'll hit the K button for the knife tool, and I'm going to click here, click there and hit enter. So let's go back to the edge select, select this edge, and we can maybe rotate it and bring it up a little bit, and then rotate this over, maybe select this edge here and rotate that edge over like that. So you can see it will just kind of start to rotate over a little bit and come in, maybe rotate it over a little bit more, and then select this edge and we can scale it up and maybe bring it down like that. So you can kind of see we have that classic dog nose shape. Maybe bring that in a little bit. All right, once you have it to the shape that you want, let's go to the face select, and we're going to select this face and then shift select the other faces, and we're going to hit E to extrude, and it's going to extrude it out along the normals, so the direction of the faces. So now we just have that nice thick nose, and we'll maybe scale the nose in, so hit S just to scale the nose down a bit. And we can also hit G and then X to bring it in on the X-axis, so the nose is just coming in a little bit. So let's now model the tongue. So I'm going to go to the face select, and we're just going to select this face and then shift select all these other faces on the bottom, and we'll hit shift D to duplicate, and then we'll scale everything on the Z axis to flatten it, and I'll hit G and then bring it in along the X axis like that. So we already have pretty much the shape. Let's go to the vertex select. We'll hold down the Z button and move our mouse into wireframe, and we want to select that vertex there on the end and double tap the G key to edge slide it in. All right, and maybe select this one and bring it out a little bit, but that's going to be pretty much the shape of the tongue. So we'll hold down the Z button, go back to solid view. So that's the tongue. So to select the entire tongue piece, we can hit the L key with our mouse hovered over the tongue, and let's scale it along the Z axis, scale it down, and let's now bring it into the mouth a little bit farther. Then we're going to hit E to extrude and just extrude it down, maybe rotate it slightly, all right, like that, so that it's a little bit thick. And then you can see the shading looks a bit weird. You can see everything, how the shading looks here, the shadow's over here, but the light's over here, but with the tongue, it's kind of the opposite. That's because the object is basically flipped. So in edit mode, we're going to select everything by just hitting A few times, and then we'll hit Shift N to recalculate the normals, and now the tongue looks correct. And I'll go back into edit mode. Let's deselect everything and then press the L key again with your mouse hovered over the tongue to select the linked vertices. And we'll go to side view. Now you can see in the reference the tongue comes way out, but I just don't really want to model a giant tongue like that. I'm just going to keep the tongue inside the mouth, but I do want to rotate the tongue and maybe move the tongue down a little bit. Maybe hold down the Alt key and then select that loop there. And we'll hit G and Z and just bring it down a little bit. All right, so now let's model the eyes. So I'm going to do this in edit mode. So we'll hit Shift A to add a new object, and we can add an icosphere. Now, if we try to move the icosphere, it's going to be merged with the mirror because it's overlapping. So we want to uncheck the clipping button, and we'll hit G to grab, and then S to scale, and G to grab, and just kind of stick it into place, scale it way down. So now that it's away from the mirror, we can turn back on the clipping button. So let's zoom in closely, and I'm going to scale it down, and I'm just going to stick the eyes kind of right there. You can go to side view by hitting 3 on the numpad, and hold down the Z button and go to wireframe and kind of see where that is, where the eye is, and it looks like I did put it right about in the right spot. So I'll hold down the Z button and go back to solid view. You can have like bigger eyes or smaller eyes, whatever you want to do. And one thing that I might want to do to make the head shape a bit better is just kind of sharpen it up a little bit. But then right here, you can see it's a little bit too popping out. So in edit mode, and I'm going to go to the edge select, and I'm going to select this edge, and hit G, or you can double tap G to edge slide it. Let's bring it in. And then if we select this edge, we'll hit G to grab and move it out a little bit like that. So the head is a little bit more round. That's a bit better. Let's hit Control S to save. And the last thing that we need to model is the ear. So we're going to make kind of some ears which are flopping down. So to model the ear, we're just going to select one of these edges and we'll hit Shift D to duplicate and we'll bring it forward a bit. Then we'll hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and we'll hold down the Z button and move our mouse into wireframe. And we're going to rotate it and move it over, just like that. And we're just going to stick it to the ear, and we're basically going to make kind of like a triangle ear shape. So now we're going to hit E to extrude and bring it down, and then S to scale and scale it down. So you can see we're basically making a triangle. Maybe bring that up a little bit more. We're now going to hit Control R to add a loop cut, and I'll left click and then drag it up and left click there. So now if we click here to go to the edge select or the vertex select, we'll select this vertex and hit G to grab and move it up, and maybe select this vertex and bring it down a bit. So I'll kind of zoom over here and hold down the Z button, go to solid view. So you can see there's the ear, but let's hit the L key to select the entire ear. And we want to bring it forward a bit, and we want to add a loop cut here. So we'll hit Control R, and we will left click and right click so the loop stays in the center. And we want to bring the loop over, so hit G and then X and bring it over on the X axis. And then if we hold down the Shift key and select these 3 vertices, we'll hit G and then X and bring it over like that. And then we want to hit E to extrude, and we want to extrude the ear kind of into the dog's head. And then extrude it one more time right down there. And then you can click and drag to box select the ear here at the very other side of the ear, so the end, and maybe bring it up a little bit. All right, that's pretty good. So now let's deselect everything, and we'll press the L key with our mouse hovered over the ear to select the linked vertices, and I'll hit E to extrude, and then we're going to hit Escape, and then we're going to hit Alt S. So Alt S is going to scale it along the normals, and the normals are the direction of the face, so you can see we can just give it some thickness. And then click right there. So we'll press L to select the entire ear, and then we can kind of rotate it and move it. Let's bring the ears down a little bit, something like that. Let's hit 3 on the numpad for side view, and we'll go into wireframe and just kind of see how that's looking. So we'll hit Control S to save the project. And so there is the modeling for the dog. So let's do the materials. So I'm going to click here to go to the material properties. Let's click on new. Now I'm going to hit 3 on the numpad to go to side view, and I'm going to select the dog reference and move the reference over. Now this type of dog is a Rottweiler, and so I am going to use the same colors and kind of the pattern there with like the lighter brown and the darker brown on this dog. So I'm going to move the reference over so that we can kind of see the dog and we can then color it. So we'll select the dog. Let's hold down the Z button, and we're going to move our mouse into the material preview. Let's go to the materials. We already added a new material. So I'll click on the material, and I can call it dog dark fur. And then for the color, I'm going to make this kind of towards the orange, but then we'll make it really dark. So it's going to be a nice dark brown. And since it's fur, let's drag the roughness value up to maybe a 0.6 or a 0.7, so it's a bit darker. So now what I want to do is make some spots here and there where like there's the lighter part of the fur. So what I'm going to do is zoom into the bottom feet, and we'll go into edit mode, and I'm going to use this loop right here. So we're going to select these 3 vertices, and we'll double tap G to edge slide them down. And then select this vertex, double tap G to edge slide it down. And then if we go to the back, we can select this vertex and double tap G and edge slide it up. All right, so now we're going to click here to go to the face select, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and select that loop of faces, and then hold down the Shift and Alt key and select that loop, and that loop, and that loop, and that loop, and then hold down the Shift key and select these 4 faces. So we'll click on the plus to add a new material. Let's click on new. Let's type in dog light fur. And then because we have those selected, we'll click on the assign button. Let's hit tab to go back to object mode. And for the base color, I'm going to make this kind of an orange, and we're going to make this kind of a light brown. All right, so just like that, let's navigate to the back feet, and we'll go into edit mode, and we're going to hit K for the knife tool, and I'm going to click here, and then we will click right down there and hit enter, so we have kind of that curve there. And then if we go to the edge select, we can select this edge. We can double tap G to edge slide it up. Select this edge, double tap G to edge slide this up, and we'll go to the vertex select this vertex, and shift select the vertex on the other side and double tap G to edge slide it so it's a bit more smooth. And then we can select this vertex and go to the other side and shift select this vertex, and we'll double tap G to edge slide them down so it starts to kind of curve over. And we can navigate here to the other side, and we're going to hit the K button for the knife tool, and we'll click here and then click there and hit enter so there's a triangle shape. So now we're going to go to the face select. we're going to shift select these faces. So hold down the shift key, select all of these faces, and then hold down the shift and alt key and select that loop of faces, and then shift alt, select that loop, that loop, that loop, and then just hold down the shift key and select the other faces there. Let's click on the dog for light and click on the assign button. Then we can go to the edge select this edge and double tap G to bring it down so it kind of curves around like that. All right, so there is the bottom. And then I also want to add some of the light fur to the top. So we're going to navigate to the top where the head is. We'll go into edit mode and we're going to hit the K button for the knife tool. And I'm going to click right back here. We'll click here and then we will click there and then we'll click there. And then let's click right up there and then right up there. So it's going to go along there and hit enter. So this is where the color is going to be. So let's go to the face select. And then hold down the shift key and we're going to select all of these faces right there, these faces here, and all of these faces around there. And also let's go down here and select these faces down there on the chin. So we're going to select the dog light fur and click on the assign button. And we can press the period on the numpad to zoom into our selection. Let's go back to object mode, see how that's looking. And I think maybe I want to select this little triangle and select the dog fur, the dark fur, and then assign that. All right, that's a little bit better. So I like how the colors are. Maybe I'll go to the edge select this edge, and maybe just rotate it a little bit more so it's a bit more angled. So now let's make the nose. So I'm going to just hold down the shift key. Let's go to the face select this face, hold down the shift key and select the other faces there for the nose. We'll click on the plus, we'll click on new, we'll type dog nose, and we'll click on the assign button. And then for the color, we're going to make it slightly brown, but then make it really, really dark. And we'll make it a bit more rough. So if we go back to object mode, I think I want to make it even more of like a gray color and even darker. So it's even darker than the fur. Maybe if I click on the dog fur, we could even make the dog fur slightly lighter so it's kind of looks a bit different. Let's go into edit mode. We'll deselect everything. We'll hit L with our mouse hovered over the eye. We'll click on the plus to add a new material. Let's click on new, and I can rename this to dog eye. Click on the assign button. And for the base color, we're going to make it fully black. And then to make it look like a shiny eye, so it's more reflective, we'll turn the roughness down so it looks a bit wet. We'll go back into edit mode. We'll deselect everything. And what I also want to do is hold down the shift key and select all the faces which are here inside the ear. And we're going to select the dog light fur and assign that. So now inside the ear, it looks a bit lighter. And then finally, we're going to deselect everything. We're going to hit the L key to select the entire tongue. We'll click on the plus there. We'll click on new to add a new material. We'll rename this to dog tongue, click on assign. And then for the color, we're going to make it kind of like a darkish, reddish, peachy color. So let's press Control S to save. And so now what I'm going to do is hit Alt H, and Alt H is going to unhide the other objects. So we can select the shark. We'll bring the shark over. So G and then X. And then we can scale the shark up because the shark is definitely the biggest animal out of the three. I'm just going to make it maybe about this big. And then we can select the duck and we'll hit G and then click with our middle mouse wheel to bring it over. And we'll bring the duck down, maybe scale it down a little bit. So the size isn't going to be like perfectly accurate. Of course, these are stylized animals, so I'm not really concerned about getting the size perfectly correct, but I'm just going to move the objects around. And we still have the references, so if you hit the 3 on the numpad to go to side view, if you want to, you can select the references and delete them. All right, so there are all the animals, so just press Control S to save. And so that's going to finish it up for this tutorial. So that is how you model these 3 low poly animals in Blender. So I hope you enjoyed the video, thank you for watching, and I hope you were easily able to follow along. And if you'd like to purchase the finished tutorial project files to get the Blender file with the finished 3D models, you can purchase that with the links in the video description on my Gumroad store and Patreon page. So thank you everyone so much for your support. And if you'd like to help support the channel here on YouTube, you can join the YouTube memberships by clicking down there on that join button. And if you join the YouTube memberships, you'll get some cool perks here on YouTube and you'll be helping to support the channel monthly. Or if you'd just like to send me a little tip, you can use the super thanks feature here on YouTube, and I do really appreciate all of your support. And if you are a beginner to Blender, then you might be interested in checking out my Blender for Complete Beginners tutorial series. So it's completely free on my YouTube channel. The link is in the video description, and throughout the entire tutorial series, I teach you all of the basic fundamentals of Blender while creating this snowman character. And also, if you do want to create more low poly art, then I have a few other low poly tutorials, like a low poly city tutorial and a low poly nature tutorial, also a low poly car tutorial, and some other low poly tutorials. So I'll have a link in the description to my low poly playlist. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.